Hello, today we are looking at Squidward's suicide. It's about Squidward's suicide taking the place of Fear of a Krabby Patty. Now I want to get something out of the way. I am a huge SpongeBob fan. I think some episodes are better than others these days. I can name some shitty ones, and I can name really classical episodes. If you want to know mine, just ask. And I'll do a vlog, top 5 hated, top 5 loved episodes for me. And also, in case if you're wondering, if you want to watch the really well-made fan version to this pasta, a link will either be in an anecdote somewhere on your screen or in the description. I haven't decided yet, but here we go. Squidward suicide. I just want to start off by saying, if you want an answer at the end, prepare to be disappointed. There just isn't one. I was an intern at Nickelodeon Studios for a year in 2005 for my degree in animation. It wasn't paid, of course. Most internships aren't. But it did have some perks beyond education. To adults, it might not seem like a big one, but most of the kids would go crazy over it. Go crazy over what? Now, since I worked directly with the editors and animators, I got to view the new episodes before they aired. Okay then, can you explain Stanley S. SquarePants and Triton's Revenge? I'll get right to it without giving too many unnecessary details. They had very recently made the SpongeBob movie. One of the best movies of all time, in my opinion. And the entire staff was somewhat sapped of creativity. Well, that actually explains so much these days! So, it took them longer to start up the season. But the delay lasted longer for more upsetting reasons. There was a problem with the Series 4 premiere that set everyone and everything back for several months. Me and 2 other interns were in the editing room, along with the lead animators and sound editors for the final cut. We received the copy that was supposed to be Fear of a Krabby Patty, and gathered around the screen to watch. Now, given that it isn't final animations often put up to a mock title card, sort of an inside joke for us. How do you know so much? With phony, oftentimes lewd titles such as How Sex Doesn't Work instead of Rockabye Believe by Valve. That would actually explain that episode very much. SpongeBob and Patrick adopt a sea scallop. Nothing particularly funny, but work-related chuckles. So, when we saw the title card Squidward's suicide, we didn't think it more than a morbid joke. One of the interns did a small throat laugh at it. The happy-go-lucky music plays as normal. The story began with Squidward practicing his clarinet, hitting a few sour notes like normal. We hear SpongeBob laughing outside and Squidward stops, yelling at him to keep it down as he has a concert that night and needs to keep up Patrick. SpongeBob says okay and goes to see Sandy with Patrick. The bubbles splash screen comes up and we see the ending of Squidward's concert. This is where things begin to seem off. While playing, a few frames repeat themselves, but the sound doesn't. At this point, sound is synced up with the animation, so yes, that's not common. But when he stops playing, the sound finishes as if the skip never happened. There is a slight murmuring in the crowd before they begin to boo him. Not normal cartoon booing that is common on the show, but you can hear very clearly malice in it. Squidward's in full frame and looks visibly afraid. The shot goes to the crowd with SpongeBob in the center frame, and he too is booing. Very much unlike him. That isn't the oddest thing, though. Oh, really? What is the oddest thing? SpongeBob booing? I only seen that once or twice. What is odd is everyone had hyper-realistic eyes. No, come on! Why? Hyper-realistic? No! What the hell is that? Very detailed. Yeah, and? Clearly, not shots of real people's eyes, but something a bit more than real in CG. 40? The pupils were red. Some of us looked at each other, obviously confused, but since we weren't in the writers, we didn't question its appeal to children yet. It's because it wasn't written by a sane person! The shot goes to Squidward sitting on the edge of his bed, looking very forlorn. Clever way of hiding the word death! The view out of his porthole window is of a night sky, so it isn't very long after the concert. The unsettling part is at this point there is no sound. Literally, no sound. Okay, we get the point. Not even the feedback from the speakers from the room. It's as if the speakers were turned off, though their status showed them they were working perfectly. He just sat there blinking in the silence for about 30 seconds. Time wide! Then he started to sob softly. He put his hands, or tentacles if you prefer, whatever, doesn't matter, over his eyes and cried quietly for a full minute more. All the while the sound in the background very slowly growing from nothing to barely audible. It sounded like a slight breeze through a forest. The screen slowly began to zoom in on his face. By slow, I mean it's only noticeable if you look at shots 10 seconds apart side by side. What's with the damn timing? Okay, well I guess this one we can let it slide. His sobbing gets louder, more full of hurt and anger. The screen then twitches a bit, it's if it twists in on itself. For a split second, then back to normal. The wind through the trees sound gets slowly louder and more severe, as if a storm was brewing somewhere. The eerie part is this sound and Squidward's sobbing sounding real, as if the sound wasn't coming from the speakers, but as if the speakers were held, the sound was coming through the other side. Okay, we get the sound is weird. Why do you have to over-explain it? And you just repeated the same stuff over and over. As good as the sound as the studio likes to have, they don't purchase the equipment to be that good or produce that sound of a quality. Huh, sounds like my high school. Below the sound of the wind and sobbing, very faint, something sounded like laughing. It came at odd intervals and never lasted more than a second, so you had a hard time pinning it. We watched the show twice, so part of me thinks sound too specific. But I've had time to think about them. Oh great, specifics, great. Cliché time! After 30 seconds of this, timing! The screen blurred and twitched violently and something flashed over the screen as if a single frame was replaced. The lead animated editor paused and rewound the film. What we saw was horrible. It was a still photo of a dead child. Death! He couldn't have been more than 6. The face was mangled and bloodied, one eye dangling. Whoop, his upturned face popped. Morbid killing! He was naked down to his underwear. His stomach cruelly cut open and his entrails laying beside him. He was lying on the pavement with him that was probably a road. The most unsettling part was that there was a shadow of a photographer. There was no crime tape, no evidence or tags or markers, and the angle was completely off for a shot designed to be evidence. It would seem the photographer was the person responsible for the child's death. We were, of course, mortified, but pressed on like this was just a sick joke. The screen flipped back to Squidward. Okay, good, we're back to Squidward, not just some really weird pasta that just popped up right out of nowhere. Still sobbing louder than before, and half body and frame. There was now what appears to be blood hanging down his face. The blood was also done in a hyper-realistic style. more! What more? You get a rant! Again. Looking as if you touch it, you'd get blood on your fingers. The wind sounded now as if it was that of a gale blowing through the forest. There were even snapping sounds of branches, the laughing a deep baritone lasting at long intervals and coming more frequently. After 20 seconds, the screen again twisted and showed a single frame photo. The editor was reluctant to go back. All were, but he had to. This time the photo was that of what appeared to be a little girl, older than the first child. She was laying on her stomach, her breath set a pool of blood next to her. Her left eye was too popped out and popped naked except for her underpants. Her entrails were plied on top of her above her another crude cut along her back. Again, the body was on the street and the photographer's shadow was visible, very similar in size and shape to the first. I had to choke back vomit and one intern, the only female in the room, ran out. The show resumed. Okay, quit cutting to this pasta and keep with this one about Squidward suicide. It's getting really annoying. About 5 seconds after the second photo played, Squidward went silent, as did all sound. Like when this scene started, he put his tentacles down, his eyes are now done in hyperrealism. What the hell is that? Like the others were in the beginning of this episode. Or really, I wouldn't know. They were bleeding, bloodshot, and pulsating. He just stared at the screen as if watching the viewer. After 10 seconds, he started sobbing, this time not covering his eyes. The sound was piercing and loud, and the most fear-inducing of all is sobbing mixed with screams. Tears and blood were dripping down his face at a heavy rate. The wind sound came back, and so did the deep voice laughing. And this time the photo lasted for a good 5 frames. The animator was able to stop it on the 4th and backed up. This time the photo was of a boy about the same age, but this time the scene was different. The entrails were just being pulled out of the stomach wound by a large hand. The right eye popped and dangling, blood trickling down from it. The animator proceeded. It was hard to believe, but the next one was different because we couldn't tell what. He went on the next, same thing. He went back in first and played them quicker, and I lost it. I vomited on the floor, the animating and sound editors gasping at the scenes. The 5 frames were not as if they were 5 different photos. They were played out as if they were frames from a video. We saw the hand slowly lift out the guts. We saw the kid's eye focused on it. We even saw 2 frames of the kid beginning to blink. The lead sound editor was told us to stop. He had to call the creator to see this, Mr. Hillenberg. Arrived within about 15 minutes. Okay, this time I'm not gonna let that slide. Where the hell did you get that timing? He was confused as to why was called down there. So the editor just continued the episode. Once the few friends were shown, all screaming, all sound again to stop. Squidward was just staring at the viewer, a full frame on his face for about 3 seconds. The shot quickly panned, and that deep voice said, "Do it!" And we see in Squidward's hands a shotgun. He immediately pulls the gun to his mouth, holds the trigger, realistic blood and brain matter splatters against the wall behind him, and his bed, and he flies, begin with the force. The last 5 seconds of this episode show his body in the bed on his side, one eye dangling on what's left out of his head on above the floor, staring blankly at it. Then the episode ends. Mr. Hillenberg is obviously angry at this. He demanded to know what the heck was going on. Most people left the room at this point. So, it was just a handful of us just to watch it again. Viewing the episode twice. You said that you viewed it twice. Why are you saying you viewed it again? You viewed it twice again. That is weird. Only served to imprint the entirely of it in my mind and caused me horrible nightmares. I'm sorry I stayed. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm still reading this. The only theory we could think of was a file that was edited by someone in the chain from the drawing studio to here. The CTO was called in to analyze what it happened. The analysis of the file did show it was edited over by new material. However, the timestamp of it was mere 24 seconds before we began viewing it. All equipment involved was examined for foreign software, hardware, as well as glitches, as if the timestamp may have glitched and showed the wrong time. But everything checked out fine. We don't know what happened, and to this day, nobody does. There was an investigation due to the nature of the photos, but nothing came to it. No child was seen as identified, and no clues were gathered from the data involved, nor physical clues in the photos. I never believed in the unexplainable phenomenon before, but now I have something happen and can't prove anything about it beyond anecdotal evidence. I think twice about things. Okay, that was Squidward's suicide. Here's the problems with it. One, the parts where the children were morbidly murdered, with the entrails and the eye dingling up, yeah, that was more like copy and pasted right into it. It felt very copy-paste, and it always distracted you from the story, taking away some believability to the pasta. Hyper-realistic, yeah, and then when you're at that point, you know this is not a real thing. Sorry, if you were trying to make this pasta feel very believable, I'm sorry to say it didn't work. And to be honest, I didn't like it to begin with. I didn't like this. It reminded me a lot of the newer SpongeBob episodes. How some are just pure shit, and some, well, are okay. But I don't really see much here that would really keep interest. So, that's about it. Overall, just not believable and very dumb. Okay, bye.